Hey everyone, my name is Nathan and welcome to Maple Street. If you clicked on this video wondering what the heck an Alfies is, the Alfies is my personal movie award show where I honor the movies I saw for the first time in a given year. Now, different than most award shows out there, I'm not limiting myself to only new releases. Any movie I saw for the first time qualifies. And so it gives you kind of an idea of what we're working with here. As long as it's a full-length movie and as long as it was a first-time watch, it qualifies to receive a nomination. Now, I have several categories that you are familiar with, but I also have some unique categories that are tailored to my taste. More on that as we go through the award show. This is the 5th year I have done this. It has been a blast. It's a video that I look forward to making all year long because this is my way of closing out the year before and moving on to the new year. I saw just under 250 movies for the first time this year, and so a lot of great options and in some cases bad options to choose from for my categories and for nominations. Before we get any further, I'm going to go ahead and play a tribute from my year. This is just a select number of movies I saw for the first time in 2024. Not all of them, but it gets the point across. Enjoy. Welcome back. So before I start off with the formal categories, I want to give a few shout outs. My first movie of the year was Pot of Gold from 1941. My last movie of the year was Made for Each Other from 1939. Yes, it was definitely on purpose that I started and ended the year with a James Stewart movie. If you weren't aware, I devoted 2024 to completing James Stewart's filmography. I started the year needing around 24 movies to complete the filmography, and throughout the year, starting with Pot of Gold and ending with Made for Each Other, I checked off the remaining movies needed. The shortest movie I watched in the year was Recess: Miracle on 3rd Street. This is at least the shortest movie that still is considered a feature-length film, running at 63 minutes. The longest movie I watched was Exodus, starring Paul Newman and Eva Marie Saint. This was watched during July when Eva Marie Saint was my star of the month. And finally, a shout out to the weirdest watch of 2024. It easily goes to Hundreds of Beavers. This is not a knock to the movie, it's just a really weird movie, but I did enjoy it. In my tribute, I mentioned that my most watched year was 1964. Here are the movies that I saw for the first time from that year. With this specific metric, I exclude the current year and the year before because it's inevitable that I'm going to watch previous year's movies to lead up to the Oscars, and then it's especially inevitable that I'm going to watch current new releases because I go to the theaters a lot. And so excluding, in this case, 2024 and 2023, my most watched year was 1964. And here's a brief look at movies by the decade to give you an idea of which decades I was watching the most of in 2024. I was shocked to look at this and see that I only watched 2 movies from the 2010s. I promise I like the 2010s. I think I just sort of neglect that decade because for the most part, I've seen a lot of what I want to watch. All right, without further ado, let's get started with my first official category. I usually start with character of the year, but I'm going to try something new this year. Let's start off with the worst watch of the year. I figured it's a nice bookend. You start with the worst movie, you end with the best picture. Let's get started. The nominees for Worst Watch of the Year are The Academy of Magic. This was a ridiculous animated film that was a complete knockoff of Harry Potter and Frozen. It was laughably bad. It was funny because it was so awful. Green Horizon was a movie I watched for James Stewart's filmography, and unfortunately, it felt more like a nature documentary than anything. And I want to watch a James Stewart movie to see James Stewart. Hot Blood was just plain boring and it had a very ridiculous plot. I'm getting bored just trying to remember what this movie was about. I do know that I didn't like it. Madam Web is a movie I'm sure you're all far too familiar with. I don't even need to explain why it's here. The Magic of Lassie was another James Stewart movie checked off the list, and unfortunately, it was just super cheesy. It felt very dated as well. And finally, last and certainly least, Smorgasbord, a movie I watched for TCM's Summer Under the Stars, specifically when it was Jerry Lewis's day. I am not a fan of the actor, and so I was doomed from the start. Smorgasbord was no help because easily and by far the winner for Worst Watch of the Year is in fact Smorgasbord. I hate this movie. I despise this movie. It's just gag after gag. The gag wasn't funny to begin with, and imagine watching that same gag for an additional 5 to 10 minutes. This was a chore to get through. At least with a lot of these other bad movies, they were entertaining. Smorgasbord made me want to rip my eyes out. The night is young, I can't be getting this heated. The next category is my favorite character of the year. Something I like to do is not only do I nominate the character, but I also assign them a Hogwarts house. Alfredo from Cinema Paradiso. I'm assigning him Gryffindor because I find him to be very courageous and stalwart. Amber Atkins from Drop Dead Gorgeous. She's quite the airhead on the surface, but I think when you consider what she goes through in this movie, I'm giving her Gryffindor. Dave Stoller from Breaking Away. I assigned him Hufflepuff. I think he has a big heart. He cares about his family. He cares about his friends. He cares about his hometown. He's also conflicted about what decisions to make, I think because it jeopardizes these things I mentioned that he cares about so much. And so to me, that screamed Hufflepuff. Elphaba from Wicked also gets a nomination, and I am assigning her Gryffindor. Similar to Amber Atkins, I think she is a great example of standing out in a crowd. She doesn't care what others think. She's used to being ridiculed, and she owns that and uses it as a strength. And then I have Hercule Poirot, specifically Peter Usanov's portrayal of the character. I saw 3 movies where he played this character this year. He's easily a Ravenclaw. I mean, he's a detective, very smart, and very entertaining to watch. And finally, Tony Perkis from Heavyweights, easily a Slytherin. He really cares about that ambition and being seen and having his name known, his face recognized. And fun fact, he's also the first Slytherin I've ever nominated. And the Alfie goes to Dave Stoller from Breaking Away. Not much more to be said. I really liked his character, and plus as a fellow Hufflepuff, I might be a little biased. The next category is for Best TV Show. Our first nomination, we find Alfred Hitchcock Presents Season 1 specifically. This was a great experience watching this Twilight Zone-esque anthology series with a new story each time. Lessons in Chemistry, though a limited series, still packed a big punch. I was emotionally attached to this TV show. I really liked the performances, and I thought it had a great storyline, specifically on the injustice of men and women during this time period. Sugar was another limited TV show I watched on Apple TV that especially grabbed my attention with the love letter it has towards classic cinema, but the story kept me there, and ultimately I was a fan of the direction it went in. I thought it was very unique and unexpected, and I think it worked. Survivor gave us 2 solid new seasons in season 46 and 47. I was also able to watch a few other older seasons for the first time, including the iconic season 40 Winners at War. And finally, X-Files Season 1 exceeded my expectations with paranormal investigations. I was not expecting much, but I kept wanting more at the end of each episode. Similar to Hitchcock Presents, each episode's a new story, and I really dug that. And the Alfie goes to Survivor. I won't lie, this is definitely more of a career award. I've been watching Survivor for many years, but only starting around 2021 did I commit to old seasons, and ever since then it's been a matter of checking off several new seasons per year. 2024 happened to be the year where I finally completed the entire show. So yes, I've seen all 47 seasons of Survivor as of filming this. The next category is for Best Score. The nominees are Chris Bowers, Wild Robot; Marvin Miller for The Teacher's Lounge; Ennio Morricone for Cinema Paradiso; Daniel Pemberton, Fly Me to the Moon; Reinhard Zalup and Gins Zilbelodes for Flow; and Hans Zimmer for Dune Part 2. Each of these scores meant something to me, and I think they all did a great job at moving the story forward and playing an integral role in the film. But ultimately, I'm awarding Ennio Morricone for Cinema Paradiso. From the moment the movie began, I thought this film had a great score, and it almost felt familiar to me, even though obviously I saw the movie for the first time in 24, something that I find myself randomly humming to. It's a very beautiful score, and it's not like there's one main theme that stuck out. There were several tracks that stuck out to me. Next category is Best Documentary. The nominees start with Girl State, which I found to be a worthy follow-up to Boy State, and I think it added an additional great narrative on equality between girls and boys. The Remarkable Life of Evelyn was one I had a chance to check out virtually at Sundance last year. It's the only movie I can say that about, so I need to say it whenever I can. But I really appreciated the creative documentary storytelling that this film used. Incorporating video game characters and the animation was so clever, and I think that it deserves so much more attention, especially at big award shows like the Oscars, than it's getting. Spellbound followed 8 children competing for the National Spelling Bee Champion title. I never thought I could be so invested in a spelling bee game. Spellbound proved me wrong. I was at the edge of my seat multiple times in the movie. Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, showed us that he really was, a great guy, whether he was wearing the cape or not wearing the cape. You like how I avoided saying a Superman? Nice try. Not gonna fall for that. 3 Identical Strangers was a head scratcher. The fact that this story actually exists is insane. You're watching a documentary, not a fictional product. These 3 siblings who were all separated at birth have a story, and it was very engaging following it. And When We Were Kings gave us a very cool behind-the-scenes look at Muhammad Ali's career, specifically this fight and how crucial it was, the tensions that were involved, and the moments leading up to the fight. It was very entertaining. And the Alfie goes to Spellbound. I'm not one to rewatch documentaries, and I rewatched Spellbound, I think, within a month or 2 of seeing it. That's how invested I was in the story, and even on a rewatch, knowing the outcome, I still really enjoyed it. Next category goes to my favorite Criterion watch. Yes, the Criterion collection is a collection I dabble in quite a bit, and here are the nominees for my favorite discoveries. Anatomy of a Fall was a great courtroom drama. I'm always a sucker for that. But on top of that, it gave us 2 really great performances. Army of Shadows was a espionage thriller that did not hold back. It was disturbing. It also felt very real. There was something about it that felt so authentic. I think that's what made it even more disturbing. The Last Command shows us the story of a once great commander in the military and what his life has become post-military life. I'm giving a very vague description. It's a silent movie that's really short. You should check it out. It's free on YouTube. Miracle in Milan was the feel-good Criterion of the year. So many miraculous things happen in this movie. Specifically, I loved the broom flying scene. My Man Godfrey was on that same note, a feel-good movie. I think it played more for laughs, lots of funny moments. That's what you can expect when you're watching a movie with William Powell and Carol Lombard. It has a great story as well. And finally, One-Eyed Jacks. This was watched during Marlon Brando month in April of 2024. I loved Marlon Brando's performance here. The story went in directions I wasn't expecting, and that's all the more reason I wanted to praise it with nominating it for Criterion of the Year. And the Alfie goes to The Last Command. Take some time, give it a watch. It's a very powerful, moving story. Even for those who aren't as big into silent movies, I think this one will touch you in a certain way. My next category, the best new release of the year. The first nomination goes to Dune Part 2, which completely transcended me from my theater seat to the world of Arrakis. This was an incredible experience. I saw it in IMAX 2 times, in theaters 3 times altogether, and once at home. I'm a big fan of Dune. I read the book. I also thought it was a great adaptation. Flow was a very effective animated movie at making me feel peaceful. I also found it to be a very meditating experience. There's no dialogue. The animals definitely don't speak here, but I found it very easy to get lost in the story and just enjoy the very short run time of the film. Girls State was mentioned previously, so I won't go into it further here. Inside Out 2 was a great addition to Pixar's catalog, and I think it was a worthy sequel to Inside Out as well. That's coming from a big fan of the first movie. I think that Inside Out 2, though similar to the first movie, also introduced new story elements that worked really well, and if they can make a solid third movie, this is going to be one of the greatest trilogies we ever get. The Remarkable Life of Evelyn was already mentioned. I'll move on to my final nomination, Wicked. Before watching the movie, I was familiar with 2 or 3 songs from the Broadway production. I've never seen the Broadway production. It's on my bucket list. So watching the movie was really the first time I actually got to know the story of Wicked, and I really enjoyed it. I thought the performances were awesome. Music was great, especially because I was familiar with some of it, and it was just nice to be able to finally connect the dots on music lyrics to actual story. And the Alfie goes to Dune Part 2. You know, it's a little on the nose having a giant poster of Dune Part 2 in the background. I couldn't resist. It wins for Best New Release. All right, let's turn the page and focus on some acting categories. The nominees for Best Performance by an Actress in a Supporting Role are Amy Adams in Drop Dead Gorgeous. I mentioned Amber Atkins was airheady. Wait till you meet Amy Adams' character, because she is as ditzy as they come, and that's exactly why I thought this performance was so fun and entertaining to watch. I mean, just look at the picture I chose. Cate Blanchett for The Aviator did a great job at portraying Katharine Hepburn on screen. I've seen several Katharine Hepburn films. Cate Blanchett got the performance down to a T. Patty Duke in The Miracle Worker showed what it was like to live as Helen Keller. When I was watching the movie, I didn't feel like I was watching actors performing. I felt like I was watching Helen Keller's story, and that says a lot. Ruth Gordon in Rosemary's Baby was the right balance of creepy, uncomfortable, awkward, and I think for this story and this movie in particular, that performance was very warranted and needed. Ariana Grande in Wicked reminded me that she can act beyond Nickelodeon TV shows. Not only was she great in her performance, but also the songs. This isn't typically the kinds of songs you hear from Ariana Grande, and I thought she killed it. And finally, Margaret O'Brien from Meet Me in St. Louis. I really liked Margaret's performance. She was such a talented kid actor. I thought she did a great job, especially at playing this spunky younger sister role. And the Alfie goes to Patty Duke for The Miracle Worker. Big fan of hers, and I'm excited to rewatch this in the future. The nominees for Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role are Salvatore Cascio from Cinema Paradiso. It's a kid performance that I think was essential to making Cinema Paradiso work as well as it does. You couldn't just pull any kid off the street to perform this role. It required someone who had acting chops, who could both make you laugh, make you cry, and I think Salvatore did a really good job at that. Jackie Cooper in The Champ also proved to be a very good kid actor. I really liked his character here, and I think he did a great job at portraying the struggle it is having a drunken father that you look up to, but also that you worry about so much. And for being such a young age, I think he portrayed that very well. James Earl Jones in Field of Dreams. I highly recommend you check out more of James Earl Jones's work in front of the camera. We are so used to just hearing his voice, but when you actually watch a performance and see his facial expressions and how he responds, how he delivers lines with his face being shown, it's a completely new experience. Edmund O'Brien in 7 Days in May, I just liked following his character. I find that sometimes a performance can be good if you look forward to seeing their character on screen, because that's not just thanks to the script or thanks to the character itself, that's thanks to the performance and how they're bringing the character to life. I think he did a great job at this. Dennis Quaid in Breaking Away showed me a new side of Dennis Quaid that is not Hallmark movie acting. I feel like in recent years we see a lot of him in these random made-for-home movies, and I loved his performance here. It is comedic, but it's also deep. You understand the struggle that he's going through where he just feels trapped. He did a really good job at portraying that feeling of being trapped, and in between he had a lot of great line deliveries. And Milo Machado Granier from Anatomy of a Fall. Similar to Salvatore and Jackie, I thought he gave such a moving performance that I think was crucial to the plot working as well as it does in Anatomy of a Fall. Especially when this kid starts crying, you feel for him, man. He is in such a tough situation, and I think he did a great job at portraying the predicament he's in. And the Alfie goes to Salvatore Cascio. I just love every scene with this kid in it. I think he does a great job. I think this is an Alfie's first awarding both supporting performances to child performances, so that's fun. The next category, Best Performance by an Actress in a Leading Role, we have Anne Bancroft from The Miracle Worker. Anne Bancroft, like I said, with Patty Duke as Helen Keller, was able to portray the performance in such a way where I didn't feel like I was watching acting. I felt like I was watching the real story as if it was a documentary. Leonie Benesch gave a great performance in The Teacher's Lounge that I think is subtle, but as the film progresses, it just starts unraveling more and more. Not only does the plot unravel, but her performance unravels. I think it was a great one too for this story. Cynthia Erivo in the role of Elphaba was simply incredible. Amazing singing voice, but also great acting as well. Can you imagine if we got Wicked and it was just one of the factors, like she was a great singer but a bad actor, or vice versa? I'm so grateful that we have a Wicked movie where on both fronts, Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, for what it's worth, deliver on both acting and singing. Mia Farrow in Rosemary's Baby gave a very real performance. I feel like if I was in her situation, I don't like thinking about that, but I feel like she did what many people would do in that situation, and the way she shows her concern is very real and authentic. Sandra Hüller in Anatomy of a Fall also did a great job. She has to juggle both playing a modern role with the present story, but also things that have happened in the past. I think she juggles that very well. And finally, Meryl Streep in A Cry in the Dark. I really liked her performance, and I think she did a great job at convincing me she was an Australian citizen. I don't know how she does it. She is such a great actress. If I wasn't familiar with her, I would have thought she was Australian in real life. And obviously she gives a very good performance outside of the accent as well. And the Alfie goes to Anne Bancroft for The Miracle Worker. Fun fact, this is the second year in a row that I have awarded both the performance by a supporting actress and performance by a lead actress in the same movie. Last year, it was for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. The nominees for Best Performance by an Actor in a Leading Role go to Marlon Brando in One-Eyed Jacks. I thought he was very convincing at being this man with a vendetta, but also playing it off as very cool and slick. Dennis Christopher in Breaking Away did a really good job at tugging at my heartstrings and allowing me to relate to him, even though I shouldn't relate to him. I mean, I'm not from Indiana. I've never lived in Indiana. I'm not a cycler per se. I don't have a knack for the Italian culture, yet I feel for him and I relate to him. And I think that happens because of his great performance. Anthony Hopkins in One Life gave another moving performance. You can make a list of moving performances from Anthony Hopkins. This one is more than worthy to join that list. I'm thinking particularly of the scene that takes place in the audience. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Burt Lancaster in The Train was also a very moving performance, and I think a different kind of moving performance. There was a sense of emotion but also action in this role. It's not one that's just dialogue per se, it's a very physical role, and I think that he checked off the boxes on all fronts. Philippe Noiret in Cinema Paradiso gave a very moving performance. That seems to be a common theme for me, but I think he specifically did a great job at bringing Alfredo to life and making us love him as a character, not only for being a fatherly figure to Toto, but also for having such great wisdom to share. And there are so many people in real life like this that they may not be the president of a company or they may not make a lot of money, but they're like the wisest person that you know, and that's real. And I think that Philippe did a great job at portraying that. And Peter Ustinov in Death on the Nile, like I said, I saw 3 different performances of his playing the same character. I had to nominate one of them because I think he just does a great job in this role. My favorite portrayal of the character. I couldn't tell you why I chose Death on the Nile over Appointment with Death or Murder Under the Sun, because really I think he gives it his all in all 3 performances, but for this sake, I'm nominating him for Death on the Nile. And the Alfie goes to Philippe Noiret in Cinema Paradiso. I cannot wait to continue to check out this movie through the years and just get more of this performance. I think it is definitely one for the ages. And similarly to the actresses, this is also the second year in a row that I have awarded the actor in a supporting role and actor in a leading role from the same movie. Last year it was Cool Hand Luke. This year, Cinema Paradiso. All right, switching gears back to a few more movie categories. The nominees for Best Animated Feature are Cats Don't Dance. I feel like I could just leave it at that. It's a great title on its own. I really appreciate the love letter that this movie is to classic Hollywood, and on top of that, I think it had some great animated musical numbers and a really fun villain too. The First Slam Dunk gave me a new perspective on basketball that I hadn't seen before. I thought it was a fascinating portrayal of basketball, not only through their style of filmmaking, but through making it an anime as well. Flow gets a nod here, as well as Inside Out 2. The next nomination is Robot Dreams. This was such a clever and creative movie. I love that you get this Zootopia-esque world. There's no dialogue ever mustered. I thought that it was just a very well-made movie. There are scenes in this movie that I think of randomly, and when a movie does that to me, where I could be doing the most non-related activity to movies, if I'm thinking about a movie, that says something about the movie. That's happened to me several times with Robot Dreams. And on the same wavelength of robots, The Wild Robot gave us a very sweet, meaningful story about what it's like to be a parent to someone. And on top of that, it gave a great look at nature. And the Alfie goes to Flow. There were a lot of similarities with animated movies this year. Both Flow and Robot Dreams had no dialogue. Both Flow and Wild Robot connected you to nature. But ultimately, of those 3, which I would say were the biggest contenders, I had to go with Flow because of all those specific categories. Flow is what speaks to me the most. The nominees for Best International Feature are Anatomy of a Fall, Army of Shadows, Cinema Paradiso, Flow, Miracle in Milan, and Teacher's Lounge, which I thought did a great job at starting with something so small and just showing how something so small can turn into something so big and ruin the lives of many people. And the Alfie goes to Cinema Paradiso. Of all the international movies I saw this year, Cinema Paradiso was the one that touched me the most and that had me thinking the most about it post-watching. A new category this year that is long overdue, I don't know how I'm barely starting this now. The nominees for Best Black and White Picture are The Champ, a great portrayal of a father and a son, especially a father that's going through a lot of hard times. The Last Command. The Longest Day gave us a great perspective on World War II, specifically the various battles that were happening during D-Day. I really appreciated the perspectives, and I had a hard time believing that this movie was made in the 60s because it was that well made. If it wasn't in black and white, I think it could fool people for being a movie made today. The Miracle Worker, 7 Days in May. This political thriller penned by Rod Serling had me at the edge of my seat. It is clear that it was penned by Rod Serling with some amazing one-liners, but on top of that, as was established earlier in the award show, some great performances as well. And finally, The Train, a very moving picture that also takes place during World War II, but in a completely different scenario. I liked The Train because it showed how World War II was being fought everywhere, not only on a battlefield, it was even being fought in something as simple as transporting art on a train. And the Alfie goes to The Miracle Worker. This was a stacked category. It was hard to choose a winner, but ultimately of these nominations, The Miracle Worker I think left the biggest impression on me. I will say too, in defense of 7 Days in May and The Train, I did watch those ones in like the last 2 weeks of the year, and so I want to sit with them more. That's just the unfortunate nature of this award. I watched Miracle Worker for the first time in August, so I've had more time to sit with it. You can't really do much about that. Turning the page again to my actor of the year. This is different than actor in a leading role or supporting role. This is specifically highlighting the actors that I watched the most movies from, or maybe I had a high average rating from them of the movies I did watch. So with each of these stars, I will include the average rating I gave the first time watches, as well as go over my favorite watches from them. Starting with actor of the year, the nominees are Marlon Brando. My favorites included Moratori, One-Eyed Jacks, and A Streetcar Named Desire. Burt Lancaster gave me 7 Days in May, The Train, and The Killers. A lot of end-of-year watches with Burt Lancaster. He came out of nowhere and just really impressed me. Paul Newman is a familiar face to the award show, winning Actor of the Year last year. I had 9 movies watched this year and discovered some great ones, including Ombre, The Rack, and The Color of Money. A side plug for my recent top 10 Paul Newman video. It's out now. Check it out. Edmund O'Brien, though I didn't watch as many movies from him, I was constantly impressed. Specifically checking out 7 Days in May, The Longest Day, and The Rack. I really liked his performances in all these movies, and I really liked the movies too. James Stewart was easily the actor I watched the most movies from, 24 movies. The average doesn't necessarily speak for itself. However, the argument I would make is that I had already seen all his very good movies before this year. This was more so checking out the more obscure watches like The Magic of Lassie and Green Horizon. With that being said though, there were some great discoveries still, including Made for Each Other, Seventh Heaven, and Carbine Williams. And Peter Ustinov, 5 new movies, the highlights being Death on the Nile, Evil Under the Sun, and Billy Budd. And the Alfie goes to James Stewart. This is probably the most obvious award of the night. I literally said at the beginning of the video that 2024 was my year with Jimmy, where I watched all his movies, completed his filmography. This was the last year I could possibly nominate him, seeing as how there are no more first-time watches out there for me. I had to give it to James Stewart. 24 new movies. I had a great time watching him throughout the year. And now the nominees for Actress of the Year. The first nominee is Lauren Bacall. I honored her as my star of the month in September and really enjoyed specifically Dark Passage, Young Man with the Horn, and Designing Women. Bette Davis was my star of the month in February, and I enjoyed her team-ups with William Wyler, specifically Jezebel and the Little Foxes, and bonus points for It's Love I'm After, which was just a fun romantic tale. Janet Leigh, I think this is her 4th time being nominated for Actress of the Year. I saw 3 new movies from her this year when I honored her as my star of the month in May. Those included The Vikings, Angels in the Outfield, and The Romance of Rosie Ridge. I saw 4 new movies from Myrna Loy, including completing the Thin Man series. I also checked out Libelled Lady and Wife vs. Secretary. Eva Marie Saint was my star of the month in July. I really enjoyed 36 Hours, Grand Prix, and The Stalking Moon. And finally, Maggie Smith, though there weren't a lot of movies checked out, she definitely was a defining actress of 2024 for me, with performances in Death on the Nile, Evil Under the Sun, and Gosford Park all standing out to me. And the Alfie goes to Eva Marie Saint. This category is very subjective, as is every category of the award show, obviously, but I think it just goes to show that I'm not necessarily awarding the person who I saw the most movies from or the person who got the best rating. I mean, James Stewart had the worst rating of the actors. Eva Marie Saint was that actress where she didn't have the highest average rating, she didn't have the most movies watched, but in every movie I watched from her, I enjoyed her, and I came out of it, even if I wasn't as big a fan of the movie, I came out of it being a big fan of her. Before this year, she was, I'll be honest, another blonde actress that was in an Alfred Hitchcock movie and who gave a great performance in On the Waterfront, but now she is just a favorite actress. I really like her, and there are still movies I want to check out from her, so was glad I was able to honor her and see 7 new movies this year. The penultimate category, Director of the Year. This is very similar to my Actor and Actress award. I will give an average rating as well as some favorite movies seen for the first time. The first nominee is John Frankenheimer. Highlights included 7 Days in May, The Train, and Grand Prix. Then we have Ilya Kazan, who impressed me with A Streetcar Named Desire. I also really enjoyed Boomerang and Wild River. Henry Coster gave me 3 good James Stewart movies, including No Highway in the Sky, Take Her She's Mine, and Dear Bridget. Martin Scorsese gave me 3 great movies, all averaging a 4 out of 5, The Color of Money, The Aviator, and Killers of the Flower Moon. Bernard Wicke gave me 2 movies, but both of them were 4.5 out of 5. Really enjoyed The Longest Day and Moratori. And finally, William Wyler, 3 new movies. I mentioned them previously with Bette Davis. We have Jezebel, The Little Foxes, and this time The Letter. And the Alfie goes to John Frankenheimer. John Frankenheimer gave me hit after hit, with 7 Days in May even getting a 5 out of 5 for me. And finally, the category you have all been waiting for, Best Picture. The best movie I saw for the first time in 2024. I had a great lineup, but ultimately I can only go with one. The nominees are Breaking Away, Cinema Paradiso, Dune Part 2, Flow, The Last Command, The Miracle Worker, 7 Days in May, Spellbound, The Train, and Wicked. And the Alfie for Best Picture of 2024 goes to Cinema Paradiso. I love the tribute that it has to movies in old Hollywood. The 2 references to Wonderful Life are the closest I'll ever get to awarding Wonderful Life Best Picture. I promise that's not the reason I gave it to Cinema Paradiso. But I think it also is just a great coming-of-age story and a really good father and son story, even though Alfredo and Toto aren't even related biologically. It's a beautiful story. I do have to say one thing, though. I watched the director's cut first, and then I watched the regular cut. I would recommend, if you haven't seen Cinema Paradiso, watch the regular cut first. The director's cut has a very different direction the story goes in. You still get the same ending and everything, but there's a whole 40 minutes or so of added on scenes that totally changes the narrative of the story. The regular cut, I think, is more grounded and does a good job at being a love letter to cinema / a coming of age film / a father and son. Everything I said about it that I love, I think exists in the regular cut. The director's cut, all of that exists, but on top of that, I think there's an added in emphasis on the romantic story. And I don't know if that works as well, and so if I had to choose one, I would choose the regular cut. There are still things I like about the director's cut. I'm not disliking it. I mean, clearly I just awarded the movie Best Picture. I'm just saying, if you had to choose one, I would recommend starting with the normal cut. And on the screen right now, you'll see the official ranking of the 10 Best Picture nominees. All great movies to work with. It was so hard choosing one, but ultimately, here's my ranking for anyone that's curious. And I love providing some stats at the end of the award show, so I'm going to briefly go through just a few new stats in Alfie's history. Here's a look at the most nominated movies as well as the wins each of those nominees got. I was really sad that Wicked got 0 wins. Also sad with Flow only getting 1 win. I feel the same way towards Breaking Away, and then Anatomy of a Fall just hurts. Not even making it into Best Picture was so hard. Fun fact, Cinema Paradiso is the first movie to be nominated for Best Picture from the 1980s. Therefore, by default, it's also the first movie to win from the 1980s. Seeing as how it's the 5th year I've been doing the Alfies, I wanted to look back at the other Best Picture nominees through the years. I've been doing this award show since 2020, and I've stacked up quite a few Best Picture nominees. Here's a look at Best Picture nominees by the decade. I was shocked to see that 1930s has 0 nominations. I swear I love that decade. I guess I've already seen all the good stuff. I was shocked with 1980s. I was also shocked that 1990s only had 1 nomination. I'm not as shocked with 2010s for the same reason I mentioned earlier. It's just a decade that I feel like I've seen everything I want to see, and so it's rarer, I would say, to discover these great classics. Just for fun, I thought I would include my favorite movie of each decade discovered from 2024, so here is a look. If you remember, I only saw 2 movies for the first time from the 2010s decade. Three Identical Strangers was going up against Crazy Stupid Love, fun fact. I actually really enjoyed that movie, but I ended up going with Three Identical Strangers. James Stewart sets a new record for most movies watched from a star in a given year, and he beats his own previous record of 17 movies with 24 movies. I Could not tell you which actor will beat him, if an actor will beat him ever. 24 movies in a year from 1 star, it's quite a bit. The current placement otherwise goes Olivia de Havilland in second place with 15 new movies discovered in 2023 from her, and Marilyn Monroe with 12 new movies watched in 2022. A fun stat that actually isn't too fun and kind of sad, James Stewart was never nominated for a performance. He got nominated for Actor of the Year, I want to say in 2021. He was never nominated for a performance though. I think again, that's speaking a lot to, I've already seen a lot of his greatest performances. For crying out loud, his performance as George Bailey is possibly my favorite performance of all time. So don't feel too bad about that. I think it's more just the nature of when I started this award show. Spellbound is the first documentary to be nominated for Best Picture. And look back at animated movies that also made it into Best Picture. We have Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish from 2022. And then this year, Flow making it in was awesome. And then international Best Picture nominations. We have Parasite from 2020, All Quiet on the Western Front 2023, Flow of course, and Cinema Paradiso. And on the same note, Cinema Paradiso joins Parasite as 2 of 5 Best Picture winners that are international films. Thank you all so much for checking out another year of the Alfies. This is such a commitment on your end because it is a completely subjective award show. There is no voting from the audience or anything. This is solely just my way of saying, hey, I watched a lot of movies in 2024. Here is how the year went for me. Here's what I would award. If you enjoyed this and you want to see other award years, like I said, this is the 5th year I've done this, and so there are 4 other award shows to check out. I will link the playlist to that series at the end of this video. And as always, I feel like I have to give you something to comment below. I mean, other than what your thoughts were on my nominees and my movies that I awarded, what was your favorite movie of 2024? What was your favorite performance of 2024? Give me whatever you want. Go by my categories. If you want to make your own categories, the world is your oyster. Thank you all so much for visiting Maple Street. I hope you have a great day. Hercule Poirot. And then we have Hercule Poirot. Oh my gosh. Hercule Poirot.